Well, you read the title. Some roller coasters are fast, some aren't. But this is the fastest coaster from each major coaster manufacturer. Aerodynamics, Desperado, 80 miles an hour. The future for this coaster is really up in the air, and it's kind of weird that a coaster at a hotel and casino in Las Vegas is the one to take the medal for aerodynamics, but here we are. This coaster doesn't look particularly good, but it is definitely fast. There's no doubt about that. From what I've heard, the ride isn't necessarily all that smooth, so going 80 miles an hour on a track that might not be smooth could be an interesting experience. B&M Fury 325, 95 miles an hour. To say this coaster is big would be a vast understatement. This coaster is huge. Not only does it have that immense height, but it also has that immense speed. Fury 325 is most certainly a memorable coaster when you get on it, and I can't wait to ride it. And unlike Desperado, this coaster is said to be very smooth, which is a good thing for sure. B&M did an awesome job with pretty much everything on this ride, but the speed is certainly one of the best factors of it, and if you like fast coasters, this could be the one for you. Chance Rides, Lightning Run, 55 miles an hour. For a company that doesn't build very many big coasters, it is reflected by their fastest coaster not even reaching 60 miles an hour. That being said, Lightning Run is a coaster that many people enjoy for its ejector airtime. Judging from POVs and off-ride footage, it looks like a ride that has very good pacing. It'll be a fun one when I get on it, and it's one of the best coasters in the whole state of Kentucky. CCI, The Boss, 66 miles an hour. This coaster is huge and it looks like a crazy one. It's a pretty polarizing ride too, with some really enjoying the out of control feeling, while others saying it's a rough ride and should be given the RMC treatment. No matter what side you fall on that debate, however, you cannot deny how fast this coaster is. It is built on speed and speed alone pretty much, which for this video makes it a perfect candidate. Din Corporation, Hercules and Mean Streak, 65 miles an hour. Here is a brilliant example where you can see that speed does not mean it's a good ride. These were some of the most hated rides out there, Hercules for its roughness mainly, and Mean Streak mainly because of how boring and repetitive it was. So yeah, these rides were pretty terrible, but at least they were fast, which accounts for something, I think. GCI, Wodan Timber Coaster, 62 miles an hour. This coaster looks like a lot of fun, and Europa Park is glad to have it. It's the fastest GCI, but it also seems to hold that pace really well. The pacing looks really good. And the theming pre-ride looks very good as well, which is classic Europa Park. That is one of my top bucket list parks in the entire world, and hey, it would be fun to ride this coaster while there. This is easily a top 5 coaster, probably top 3, maybe top 1 at Europa Park. Gerstlauer, Karnan, 79 miles an hour. This infinity coaster looks absolutely bonkers in every single way. The layout looks crazy to begin with, but then it also has some surprise tricks up its sleeve, which I won't spoil here. This thing is huge, with a gigantic hypercoaster height drop going out of a big tower. I'm sure the experience of going from darkness to dropping into the light to rising back up into the light is a surreal one. Another top bucket list coaster, no doubt. This is often regarded as the best Gerstlauer, and it is also the fastest Gerstlauer. Quite simply, Karnan is the complete package. Giovanola, Titan and Goliath, 85 miles an hour. These hypercoasters are nearly identical. The wildest part though is that these are 2 of only 3 Giovanola coasters built, the other coaster being an invert in Africa. But back to the hypers. These coasters are fast, but in the minds of many coaster enthusiasts, they aren't particularly exciting outside of some helixes. The airtime on these coasters is lacking when compared to other hypercoasters. Some coaster enthusiasts claim these coasters are boring. I can't say from personal experience because I haven't ridden either of them, but at least they're fast and boring and not slow and boring, because there aren't many things worse than a slow and boring roller coaster. The Gravity Group, Voyage, 67 miles an hour. This is a coaster that just doesn't seem possible. The reason I say this is when you think about a couple of factors. First, this was the Gravity Group's second coaster. Their second coaster. Secondly, it goes on forever and uses the terrain to perfection. and third, it's got some pretty good speed and pacing as well. There is a very good reason that every single year this is in the running for world's best wood coaster. The Voyage is simply impressive in every way. Hopkins, Texas Tornado, 50 miles an hour. This actually isn't the only Hopkins coaster to go 50 miles an hour, but I chose this one because of how strange it is. I mean, seriously, what on earth were they thinking with those vertical loops? Is this the reason why Hopkins only built 7 coasters? Intamin, Formula Rossa, 149 miles an hour. This is the fastest coaster in the world, and just saying 149 miles an hour is insane. I really want to know what it feels like to travel at those speeds on a roller coaster because that doesn't even seem possible. Of all the companies to do it, it should have been Intamin, and it was. You have to tip your hat to the Swiss manufacturer because they pushed the speed record as far as it would go. It's too bad this ride is as far away as it is from most coaster enthusiasts because it is a wild looking one. Seriously though, 149 miles per hour. Just insane. Jinmao Rides, vertical coasters, 63 miles an hour. This is a knockoff of a B&M dive coaster in every single way, from the vertical drop to the holding brake before the drop to the splashdown at the end. Talk about an unoriginal idea. Assuming these rides are smooth, I'm sure they fall into the category of fun but not spectacular. After talking about Formula Rossa, I feel like talking about a 63 mile per hour ride is basically talking about a kiddie coaster, but that's just how crazy the former is. It's weird how Jinmao Rides copies people, but they do it all the time, and their vertical drop coasters are no different. Mack Rides, they're hyper coasters, 71 miles an hour. These coasters look really fun, and they've kind of changed the definition of hypercoaster with those huge vertical loops. They look like a great time, and hopefully we can see one of these coasters open up in the United States at some point soon. The fan favorite of these seems to be DC Rivals Hypercoaster in Australia. And I gotta admit, it does look pretty sweet. The speed isn't anything crazy for hypercoaster standards, but layout-wise, Mack Rides just does stuff that other manufacturers don't do on hypercoasters. And it's fun to see such a unique twist on a pretty popular model. I hope these rides become more popular because there's only been 3 of them built and they look awesome. It's also great to see Mack build these big coasters after building pretty much Wild Mice for so long. Mack Rides is in the coaster game and their hypercoasters prove it. Mauer, the Skyloop model, 65 miles an hour. For a company that builds some pretty small coasters for the most part, the Skyloop is a very interesting model. These coasters are short and sweet. Abismo in Madrid does have a little more meat to it, but that seems to be the only one that has an actual layout. Which I guess just makes that ride stand out. I was actually surprised that these coasters went 65 miles an hour. I didn't think they would go that quick, but here we are. Mauer Brain's probably the most bizarre model on the list. Morgan, Steel Dragon 2000, 95 miles an hour. Morgan didn't build very many coasters, but they went big or went home, as evidenced by Steel Dragon 2000, the longest coaster on Earth and one of the fastest. This ride just goes on forever, and it's one of the faster coasters we've talked about. It's too bad this coaster is located all the way in Japan, because that's really far for most coaster enthusiasts to ride this coaster. It still does strike me kind of odd that Morgan was the one to build this coaster and not B&M or Intamin. It was Morgan to build the world's longest coaster. It sure looks like an interesting one. Well, anyways, that's going to do it for part 1 of every coaster manufacturer's fastest coaster. Part 2 will be coming out at some point soon. Until then, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.